Welcome to Malpractice Podcast.
Hi, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. I feel rusty.
I feel rusty too.
And or like this is the first time that we've ever recorded. I feel like new year, new bitch. That's how I
Is that
feel.
how you feel?
But also same bitch.
I feel like New Year, same bitch, but also I feel it's been a while since we've recorded and I can feel that rustiness.
Yeah. Honestly, I think both of us needed a break.
We did, yeah.
A substantial amount of time to like not think about this.
Correct.
But then we were like, well, we miss it.
Yeah, I definitely missed recording.
Yeah.
Speaking of rusty, I'm Sydney.
And I'm Jess, and that's normal.
Yeah, and this is Malpractice Podcast.
And you can call me Rusty.
And you can call us both Rusty McRustersons. I think it was good to have a break for sure.
Yeah, it was good. I feel rested. I feel like ready
Yeah.
to tackle more science convos.
I need a little bit of a break from the holiday break because a lot of people probably feel this way, but holidays spent with
Yeah.
extended family are not always as restful as you might like them to be.
No, it's exhausting. Like you need a break from the break.
Yeah, so we got a little bit of time off, and that was nice. But welcome back because this is season 6, which I cannot believe.
Do you remember when we first started and we sounded like we had terrible audio?
Yeah. And now I had to double check when I wrote down welcome back for season 6. I was like, is it really? It is. We've been doing this a while.
We're established.
We're veterans.
Yeah. We still forget to introduce ourselves, but we are here.
But we're here and we're professionals, kind of.
What do you want from us? What do you want? What can we do?
How can we help you?
This is our night job.
Yeah, true. Which is also why we needed a break, because we work 7 jobs each.
Also, I just want to shout Sydney out per usual, but Sydney has her PhD. She's a fucking doctor now.
Oh my god.
2023 is the year of Sydney being a doctor. So only address her as such.
That's weird.
You're welcome.
So yeah, break from the break, back for season 6. What else? Anything?
Still pregnant over here.
Super
on
pregnant.
this side of the Zoom.
Jess was...
Yeah, Sydney saw me and she was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's just shocking because I feel like it changes so quickly. And then when we don't see each other in person for like a month, then I see your pregnant belly and I'm like, oh my god, it's so much bigger than last time, which is what happens.
It is like a wild ride.
Yeah, for sure. Pregnancy is what you...
Pregnancy, just life, my life. But pregnancy is like a wild ride.
Speaking of which, pregnancy and wild rides, you were recently disappointed by Wendy's Frosty, and I'm interested to hear.
Yeah. That's a great segue here. I have, which we never do usually. Great segues. I have like very sporadic cravings, and I have since the start of like being pregnant, where I'll be like, I have to have a vegetarian breakfast sandwich from Starbucks every day or I'm gonna die. Like that's like I just cannot stop thinking about that thing.
That's specific, yeah.
It's very, very specific.
Okay.
So I'm done with that one. That was like a 10-week one.
Mm-hmm.
Frosties were my current RIP to the craving now. Were my current craving where I was like, even whenever we were together this weekend, I was like, and when we drive home, I'll get a Frosty.
Right.
And then we didn't. And then I was like, I've been thinking about that Frosty, not getting it. I didn't get a Frosty. Today I'm like, before we record, I'm going to get a Frosty.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll put it off as long as I can for these that are like really bad for you, because I will have a Frosty every day.
Yeah.
And I go and get a Frosty, and I like chocolate Frosties. Like, they're not for everyone. So I order it. It comes out. And, like, as soon as she hands it to me, it's, like, milk. Like, it just has it's not being held together.
It's not what you're looking for.
I've done with the craving now. I don't want it anymore. I was like, this is not a Frosty.
I've never had
and now it's done.
Craving for a
and
Frosty.
I don't want it.
I probably haven't had a Frosty in, like, 10 years.
I don't want one anymore, but you should have been with me 2 weeks ago. I was like, you want a Frosty?
Frosty craze.
Frosty break? You want another one? It's bad. But now it's gone.
Are those the only 2, like, weird, bad cravings you've had?
Well, no, remember I made a stop at Jimmy John's. I love Jimmy John's right now.
Mm-hmm.
The number 6, shout out to their veggie sandwich.
I'll never argue the value of a veggie sandwich.
It's so good.
I love a veggie sandwich.
And then I was really normal, like, at the beginning with pickles.
Mm-hmm.
People love pickles when they're pregnant. It's a fact.
People do seem to love pickles, yeah.
I love pickles anyway.
Pickles all the time.
So
yeah, same.
I will eat a whole jar of pickles, but
I'll drink a jar of pickle juice.
oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily like different. It's just like the quantity. Like I'll sit over the sink and eat like 4, 5, 6 pickle spears and just be like, I'm having the best day of my life. Like I'm just so happy.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a podcast about food cravings, which is really...
Listen.
I'm
not against it.
Same.
But that's my update. I'm feeling so much better, though. I'm not as vommy as I was.
Good. That's important.
Poor Sydney was like on... Wait, did we talk about this on the podcast already?
I don't remember if we did, but basically Jess had to stop a recording because morning sickness got real
had to go.
in this house.
And then it's so violent that Sydney was like...
The audio was on and I was like, oh, I'm traumatized.
yeah.
She came back and she was like, you didn't hear that, did you? And I was like, do you want me to lie to you or be honest?
I think you should always lie. Just kidding.
If the answer is be honest, then I heard it and it traumatized me.
It traumatized me.
Fair. Is there anything else we were going to talk about?
I don't think so.
Okay, sick.
I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, me too. Okay, let's get into it. So today we're going to tell you the story of Marie Curie, which is a name that you hopefully already recognize.
Mm-hmm. She should be at least one talking point on curriculum in science and or history.
Agreed. Hopefully somebody already told you about her.
Unless you were asleep that day.
I definitely have had science teachers cover her, but I don't know that I knew the extent of her contribution to science.
I didn't know everything she did.
No, me neither. So she was a trailblazing scientist, the first woman to ever win a Nobel Prize, the first person and only woman to win a Nobel Prize twice.
Period.
And is still to this day the only person to win a Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific fields.
And if we ended the podcast there, that would be fine. But we have more deets.
Right. You know now
everything.
Some of the biggest, like some of the most famous prizes that she's won.
She's cool.
Yeah. I want to make a quick shout out to Jess for suggesting this topic and also putting this episode together. And we hope you love it as much as we do because I think it's extremely informative. And she's such a special person.
She's really cool. And also, like, I put, and thank you, Sydney. I love when I can, like, get into some historical bullshit. But her parents were cool. Like, and they're a little bit, like, rioty. And I like it.
All of her friends were cool. Everybody that she hung out with, I'm like, I'm jealous of you. Your life is cool.
Super cool. Maria Skłodowska, who will eventually become Marie Curie, was born in Warsaw, Poland, while it was occupied by the Russian Empire on November 7th, 1867. Mm-hmm. She was the youngest of 5 children, born to Polish teachers. Her family on both sides lost their property and fortune through involvements in Polish national uprisings to restore Poland's independence. So she and her siblings weren't born into wealth, but her parents had wealth before all of this kind of like was taken from them.
Yeah, I read a little bit more about that, and basically during the Russian occupation, if you were pro-Polish, they could just take
all your stuff
and make it property of the Russian government, which is basically what happened to them.
Yeah, very like of the times.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Very trash. And her parents were cool. So her dad taught math and physics, which I'm going to call her Maria until she changes her name when she moves to France. So, which Maria would eventually pursue for herself. After the Russian authorities took away science instruction from Polish schools, her father took the lab equipment home and used it to teach his children. So he was like, fuck your rules. Yeah. That's why they took his stuff.
Which is really cool. To take it home and teach your children.
It's super cool.
That's a cool way.
And your daughters at the time.
Pretty progressive.
Very cool. We love it. After her parents lost their money and property because of the Polish uprisings, her father was forced out of his position for his Polish sentiments. Mm-hmm. They ended up opening their home to boys as a type of boarding school to supplement their income. So basically, the Russian government was like, stop loving Poland, and they were like,
No.
no.
Right.
So then they fired them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her mother taught at Warsaw boarding school for girls, but resigned when Maria was born. She passed away from tuberculosis in May of 1878 when Maria was 10 years old. Her sister passed away almost 3 years later from typhus.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a lot of trauma happening, financial problems. It was like tough.
Yeah. She definitely didn't have an easy childhood.
Like that's a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Maria's father was an atheist and her mother was a devout Catholic. After enduring the deaths of these family members, Maria turned away from Catholicism and became agnostic and pretty much stayed agnostic her whole life. When she was 10, she attended boarding school and like a gymnasium where she won a gold medal, queen, and graduated in June of 1883. She collapsed from unknown causes and left school to spend some time in the countryside with relatives. The assumption from people that I read was that she was like overexerting herself.
Family dying. Yeah. I also read that it could have been depression because I don't think at this time she was coping well with everything going on. It's a lot.
Right. No. She and her sister weren't allowed to enroll in most higher education spaces because they were women, so they became involved with something called a flying university, which was a Polish institution of higher learning that did admit like femme-identifying students.
Yeah. The flying or floating universities, I read about these a little bit.
Isn't that so cool?
Very cool, yeah. They were secret underground schools whose location would change regularly to avoid being detected by the Russian authorities. So kind of a quick background history lesson, because I don't think I knew that much about Russian occupation of Poland. So when that happened, Poland was formally dissolved as a country in 1795. Russia took over control of basically everything, including education of Polish students. And floating universities were created by Polish educators to continue teaching Polish students, especially in subjects like physics, natural history, as well as forbidden subjects like Polish history and culture. Because there was this thing going on called the Russification, where basically they wanted Polish students to identify as Russian, not Polish.
It's a little on the nose, Russia.
The presence of these universities kind of in and of themselves were an act of resistance.
Absolutely.
So from a very early age, she was involved with, I guess, kind of activism pretty early on.
Yeah, I read that she was in a Polish youth like resistance organization.
Yeah, so did
I. We love that for her.
Agreed, for sure. Early on, Maria's father recognized her intelligence and encouraged her curiosity, but he could not afford to send her to college, so she and her sister kind of struck a deal with each other. The deal was kind of that Maria would financially support her sister while her sister was studying medicine in Paris, and then they would swippy swap in 2 years, and her sister would support her while she was getting her education.
That's so cool.
Agreed. Yeah, very cooperative, and you know, they're finding a way to get by. So Maria took a job as a home tutor and a governess with a family who were relatives of her father in order to support her sister. She eventually falls in love with their son, who would go on to become a pretty famous mathematician himself. But the family that she worked for opposed their marriage because she was poor. And the son basically was like, I mean, they're not wrong.
Which is fucked. But fine.
It's not ideal, for sure.
Rude.
The person you love being like, I mean, you are poor.
Also, they're family friends. If those are your family friends, I don't want to know who your family enemies are. Jesus Christ.
Right. They're like, ooh, you're too broke for our son?
But you can work for us.
Oh, not cool. During this time, she was also involved in a revolutionary student organization, and her situation was becoming increasingly less safe, understandably.
Right.
So then in 1890, her sister and brother-in-law invited her to come to Paris, but it would take her around a year to gather the money that she needed to make the trip. So while she saved up, she continued educating herself. She actually began her scientific training during that time in a chemical lab at the Museum of Industry and Ag, which was run by her cousin.
I mean, she's smart. That guy is probably, his family was probably like, what idiots we are, after she became famous as fuck.
I'm sure they were jealous. And actually, I read that he, so eventually in their hometown, a statue of Marie Curie is erected, and he would spend the rest of his life like sitting by the statue,
like a creep,
probably kind of thinking about what could have been. You have to wonder.
And it's too bad, so sad.
You shouldn't have been so focused on money, sucker.
You had money. Like, what was the problem? Okay, then in late 1891, she left for France.
Right.
She found a place to rent that was close to the university and continued her studies in physics, chemistry, and math at the University of Paris. Those are 3 areas that I will never have studied in my life. Thank you so much.
Fair.
Glad for you. She lived off very little and oftentimes wore all of her clothing in the winter to stay warm because she had very little money.
Yeah, she was definitely poor.
She's not living the life.
People said she had to ration her food.
Yes.
And would often faint from like physical exertion because she didn't really have enough food to keep her going.
She was super poor. So she studied during the day and tutored in the evenings to like make ends meet. In 1893, she earned her degree in physics and started working in a lab run by Gabriel Lippmann. Wow, that's the easiest name in this entire story.
Correct.
Thank God. While using a fellowship to keep studying, and eventually earned a second degree in math in 1894. The amount of degrees this woman has is wild.
If you're keeping count at home as a listener, that's 2 degrees in 2 years since she arrived in Paris, which sounds crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who knew her said she was incredibly driven to excel, and she was really passionate about learning and the work that she was doing. She once said, "Life is not easy for any of us, but what of that? We must have perseverance and, above all, confidence in ourselves. We must believe that we are gifted for something and that this thing, at whatever cost, must be attained." And that's her vibe.
I feel like that's her vibe, and I feel like that's very much like instilled from her family.
Agreed. Very hardworking people, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 1894, she met a young scientist named Pierre, who would become her husband 1 year later. He was also interested in natural science. So Pierre was an educator at the City of Paris Industrial Physics and Chemistry Higher Educational Institution. What a name, shorten it.
All of their institutions have 24 names.
Yeah, literally.
They're like a full line long on the script.
Yes. He was able to help her find a bigger lab area to work, so they began spending time together, and bam, they fell in love. Like, They loved the same stuff. They, like, fell in love in the lab, basically.
Right.
Pierre proposed, but Marie at first was like, nah, I'm gonna go back to my home country, and I don't think this is gonna work. Pierre was like, fine. Like, I'll move, too. Even if I just go over to Poland and teach French there, you're hot and smart. I'm hot and smart. Let's get married.
Right. He actually proposed to her in this super poetic letter where he said, quote, "It would be a beautiful thing to pass through life together hypnotized in our dreams. Your dream for your country, our dream for humanity, our dream for science."
Which is such a nerdy way to propose, and I love it.
That's a nerdy way to propose, but it's kind of beautiful. So.
It is beautiful. Nerds are beautiful.
Right, correct. So when they finally did get married, she apparently only had one dress to wear, so a friend offered to, like, buy her a dress, and her response was the most practical thing that I personally have ever heard. She said, quote, "I have no dress except the one I wear every day. If you're going to be kind enough to give me one, please let it be practical and dark so that I can put it on afterwards to go to the laboratory." She apparently wore that same dark blue dress that she wore to her wedding in the lab for many years thereafter.
I love her. She also had to be convinced. He was like, "I will move anywhere for you." And she was like, "Well, I guess."
Yeah, he was very into her, which...
Oh, yeah.
Can you blame him?
Same.
Yeah.
She's super cool.
Yeah, she's very cool.
I think she thought that maybe it's because what happened before to her that she was like, well, when I tell you what I actually want in life, you're not going to want that too. And he was like, I want whatever you want.
Yeah.
You and me, baby.
I read this thing
where are we going?
Where she said to him... She was like, "You have one of the finest minds that I have ever had the fortune of coming into contact with. It just so happens that mine is finer."
And if that isn't
and he was like,
vow,
"Damn, you're right."
If that isn't your vows,
move on.
What else is there? Yeah. So Marie goes home for a visit, and she tries to get a position in her area of research when she's visiting her family, because he was like, I'll move there. And she was like, bet. Sounds great.
Sounds good. Yeah, she loves Poland.
She loves Poland, right. She's a diehard fan.
Yeah.
She finds that sexism in Poland is difficult to tackle, and she wasn't able to find anything or any place that would take her at all. No matter how many degrees she had, they were like, you're a woman. good day.
Correct.
So Pierre wrote to her and was like, come back to Paris and get your PhD. And in true Sydney fashion, she said, sure.
Sure.
Pierre got his doctorate in March of 1895 and became a professor. So she does go back. She's like, you're right. I need more degrees, obviously, for people to take me seriously in this game of life. So they get married in July of 1895 without a religious ceremony. Get married, and then they're living their life. They loved bike trips and traveling, and they were incredibly close. They, like, worked together, were married. They were smart together. They were like, this is the bop.
Yeah, love and life.
So they're in love and doing great things. She's pursuing her PhD, and lots of science things are happening in the world. So in 1895, Willem
Röntgen? Something like that. Yeah.
Sure.
Tough one.
He discovers X-rays. That's what needs to be known.
Yeah.
And then this other guy, Henry, made the scientific note that uranium salts emitted a different kind of ray. Basically, that this uranium stuff was, like, super interesting to Marie. So all of the science stuff is happening in the world where people are making these one-off observations scientifically about this specific thing, uranium. And she's like, I want to know about that. I want to do work in that. So she took that idea into her thesis and would eventually go on to coin the term radioactivity.
Yeah. Everybody was pretty baffled by what was going on at the time. So this uranium salt's emitting a different kind of ray. Everyone across the field of scientific discovery was like,
whoa,
no one knows what's happening with it. Right. It's confusing.
Yeah. They were literally like,
right.
What?
So
and what does that mean?
Exactly.
And what do we do with it? And, like, what, all of these follow-up questions that happen in science. As Sydney can tell you, you discover one thing and then you have 15 other questions.
Exactly. So on that topic, Marie wrote, the uranium shows no appreciable change of state, no visible chemical transformation. It remains, in appearance at least, the same as ever. The source of energy it discharges remains undetectable. And so 15 years earlier, her husband had created something called an electrometer, which could be used to measure electrical charges and very, very small electrical charges. So using this device that her husband had invented, she discovered that the air around a sample of uranium could conduct electricity, and she hypothesized that the source of this electricity being emitted was subatomic particles, which were released as the atoms decay. This theory was really radical at the time because everyone thought that atoms were the most basic sort of unit of mass and they could not be broken down further.
So when she said that, everyone was like, gasp.
Yes, it was really radical for sure.
Yeah.
Trish Braisden, a senior chemist at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, describes it as a very shocking proposal. Quote, it was truly amazing and a bold statement at the time because the atom was thought to be the most elementary particle, one that could not be divided. It further meant that atoms are not necessarily stable. So Curie's hypothesis would revise the scientific understanding of matter at its most elemental level. It's a BFD.
Yeah, it is. And then you layer on that, like, she's a woman saying this at the time, and everyone's like...
She's a woman and a PhD student, so she's not super established in her field, but she's making these really...
big claims.
Huge claims, yeah. So then in 1897, their first daughter was born. They named her Irene. What's crazy is that at the time when they're making these insane discoveries, they didn't actually have a dedicated lab space. Like, you think of these things being discovered in a really state-of-the-art space.
Yeah.
But what they had access to was an old converted shed with broken windows that wasn't ventilated, and when it rained, the roof leaked.
At the minimum, I think when we, like, for people who are non-sciencey, I think of, at minimum, they have, like, a high school lab area. Like, they have...
Right.
And they have to wear goggles, and they have, everything's super protected. No. They were, like, making these big scientific discoveries.
Right.
In a converted, broken-down shed.
And she's wearing, like, a high-neck dress, like a...
Of the time.
Late 1800s style dress of the time, yeah. While she worked, her husband was basically watching her make these incredible discoveries, and he's thinking to himself, like, what a boss.
Yeah. He's like, she's hot. I knew it.
Yeah.
I would have moved to Poland.
I would move anywhere. So eventually he just drops his research. He's like, what you're doing is more important than what I'm doing. And he joins her on this project.
And he was researching like crystals.
Yes.
Apparently he was super into them. So for him to be like, you're cooler than me.
Right.
I
It's
want to
pretty
do
impressive.
what you're doing. Yeah.
I don't know what exactly he was doing with crystals, but basically he recognized very early on that she was going to make that she was already making incredible discoveries.
Yeah.
So then in 1898, she identified a new chemical element, naming it polonium after her homeland, Poland.
We love it.
And then
Oil.
5 months later, she identified a second element, which the world came to know as radium. And she describes the elements she studied as radioactive. So she coined that phrase and attributed them to these new elements for the first time ever.
So her husband's now like, you're the boss. And what a feminist also.
Correct.
We love Pierre.
Yeah. Oh, her husband fought for her every step of the way.
Every step.
Every time someone tries to deny her something for the rest of her life, he's like, you stop it. She did it, not me.
You stop it right now.
Right. Which is impressive.
It is. And she made a great choice with him. So
clearly.
So she's hella smart, and she's also like really perceptive. So she's learning from the people who go before her in science. The way you make a splash, you need to publish things quickly. Mm-hmm. So she did. But her first set of original findings about the rays that the element thorium gives off was published just before hers. So this other guy, basically, a German scientist named Gerhard Karl Schmidt, published something on that same topic just before her, and she was like, blast.
Yeah.
It gotta be faster. It gotta be quicker than that.
In science, we call that getting scooped. Like your work got scooped by somebody else. Yeah.
She got scooped. And she was like, scooped. That is not cool. But that didn't stop her. Between 1898 and 1902, she and her husband would publish jointly or separately a total of 32 scientific papers, including one that announced that when exposed to radium, diseased tumor-forming cells were destroyed faster than healthy cells. A fact that would eventually become huge in the world of cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm. They're working hard.
They're working hard in their shed.
Working way hard, yeah.
And then in 1900, she becomes the first female faculty member at École Normale I can't say this word.
Superior?
Oh, well, sounds easier when you say it. Superior. And her husband got a job at the University of Paris as a professor and chair of the physics department. So now they're like established. They're actually like, people are recognizing her as well.
Mm-hmm.
In 1902, her father passed away. So that happens 2 years after she gets like her big girl job, right?
Right.
In 1903, she becomes the first woman in France to earn a PhD in physics, which is a BFD.
Right.
Professors that reviewed her doctoral thesis, which was about radiation, declared that it was the greatest single contribution to science ever written. And that is a fucking compliment, and that's how I feel about Sydney's.
That's massive, yeah.
I am not a professor, and that is exactly how I feel about Sydney's doctoral thesis as well.
Thank you.
That I was like, that's my friend. The couple was invited to the Royal Institute in London to speak on radioactivity, but Marie wasn't allowed to because she's a woman to like actually speak there. But they were both invited, but they were like, Pierre, you speak.
Which is a common thread throughout this story. She is continually sort of benched because she's a woman. That's going to keep happening.
Yeah. But I will say it's interesting because they will credit her by inviting her.
Right.
And arguably she was leading everything in their couple research. And then they're like, well, Pierre, can you just speak on it?
Yeah.
And he'll often decline.
He will, yeah. I mean, it's almost like they begrudgingly give her credit by inviting her, and then they're like, but your husband probably was the leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they do when, in December of 1903, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences award the Curie couple and Henry Becquerel, the guy that we talked about earlier, the Nobel Prize in Physics, quote, in recognition of the extraordinary services they have rendered by their joint research on the radiation phenomenon. Keep in mind that Marie Curie coined the term radiation.
Right.
At first, she almost wasn't included on the Nobel Prize because she's a woman, and some members of the French Academy of Sciences had attributed the brilliance of the work not to Marie, but her coworkers, specifically her husband. But a friend and Swedish mathematician named Magnus had alerted Pierre to the situation. Basically, I don't know if he was on the committee or he just knew someone.
He was in the science space. He knew some.
Exactly.
He knew some deets.
So this Swedish guy, Magnus, tells Pierre they're sniffing around you guys for a Nobel Prize, but they're going to give it to just you.
Yeah.
And Pierre is like, oh, hell no. And he starts making complaints to some very influential people to get Marie's name added to the nomination.
And that's how you be a real ally, ladies and gentlemen, and people everywhere.
Correct.
That is allyship.
Feminism in a nutshell. Yes. Because after this, when Marie is awarded the a portion of the Nobel Prize, she was the first woman ever to be awarded a Nobel Prize.
Shout out to Pierre.
And in true bullshit fashion, when the president of the Swedish Academy administered the prize, he quoted the Bible and said about Marie Curie's research, "It is not good that a man should be alone. I will make a helper for him," like the whole Adam and Eve situation.
Yeah.
So he's saying that basically Pierre did all the work, but he needed a helper, and that was Marie Curie.
And the gall to be...
The gall?
Just the gall.
To give someone an award and be like, this is revolutionary work, but then also to tell her that she's not the true mind behind the work, she's just a helper.
He, patted her on the head.
He patted her on the head and told her to smile, all in one bundle.
Don't
Correct.
do that. You're gonna make us mad.
And that statement still pisses off a lot of people, particularly female scientists who see it as a slap in the face. They're like, I'm no one's lab helper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Similarly, when they get back to the Sorbonne, it's Pierre who's awarded a full professorship, and Marie is still not promoted. Moment of silence.
I'm pissed off.
Can you imagine how mad she was?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure he was mad too, actually.
I'm sure he was too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like... I'll say, if I've said it once, I'll say it again. He's like the best definition of an ally.
Yeah, he's definitely fighting for her to get...
Yeah, he's like, she's hot and smart. I told you this when I proposed to her. Like, I'm here for her.
That was my literal proposal. Yeah. Right.
Whatever she needs, I'll go teach French. I don't give a fuck. Like, she's cooler than me.
Yes.
I dropped crystals.
Right.
I loved crystals before I met her, and I've never seen a crystal again.
I loved my project, but I recognize that she's smarter than me. Like, that's how the whole thing felt. That's his whole vibe.
Kind of just riding her coattails at this point.
Right. In fact, when they get back, he hires a bunch of assistants, and he makes her the official head of the laboratory.
Yeah, he literally was like, glass ceiling.
I work for you now.
Here you go. Do what you want. Right.
So he's working from within his abilities to make a seat at the table for her, which is incredible.
Yeah. He built her a table, and then he said, do whatever you want with this table.
You make this table your own.
And then he left. He was like, you run it.
Correct. And that making her the head of the laboratory freed her to conduct her experiments and for the first time get paid for it. Because remember, this whole time that she's been making these award-winning scientific discoveries, she's been working as a tutor to support herself.
Yeah, she's not getting paid.
And they got the award money, obviously, from when you get a Nobel Prize, you get award money. So they hire lab assistants. She's kicking things off. Right before that, in 1904, Marie gives birth to their second daughter, who they named Eve, and she hires a Polish governess to speak the language because she wants her children to grow up speaking the language from the country that she loves.
Yeah, she's still a diehard Polish fan.
For sure. And I will also say she got a lot of flack for returning to the lab. People wrote public op-ed statements about her where they were like, I don't know, why is she spending more time in the lab than the nursery? As a woman, that's not your job.
Yeah.
And she basically chunked up a middle finger to all of them.
And I'll do the same.
Correct.
It's a salute. So in April of 1906, Pierre was actually killed in an accident where he was struck by a horse-drawn vehicle. Marie was horrified, grief-stricken, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It really took her back. In May of 1906, the physics department of the University of Paris retained the chair that was created for Pierre and offered it to Marie. She accepted and wanted to create a lab in her husband's honor. She was the first woman to become a professor at the university. So finally, recognition. And she is super traumatized, the love of her life. Like, it was awful.
Horrifying, yeah.
Hundreds of people, students, artists, photographers, celebrities, lined up outside the university on November 5th, 1906, hoping to attend her first lecture, which would have been, like, you know, really freaking cool.
Yeah. The circumstances, I'm sure, take away from, you know, I mean, that would be a huge moment of recognition for you, and the fact that it had to come after the love of your life dies really sucks.
It's true. So, in 1910, she finally isolated radium, published a 971-page document on radioactivity, and defined an international standard for radioactive emissions, the Curie.
Right.
Despite her work and commitment, the French Academy of Sciences failed to elect her to membership in the Academy by 2 votes. Those 2 people, we should find their names and shame their families.
I agree.
During that time, the public was fueled by xenophobia, and there was a speculation that Marie was Jewish, and the public was mad that she was a foreigner and an atheist, and that she was getting this recognition. So, like, she was, to your point, you were talking about people writing about her and being like, why is she working and not with her kids? They're also like, and she's like Jewish, and she was like, I'm an agnostic, and they were like, and she doesn't believe in God, and she's a foreigner, and like, you're giving her all this space, and like,
yeah,
why, for what? So there's all of that kind of brewing around. It's the 1900s, like,
I mean, from day one she had certified haters everywhere,
period.
And on that point, in 1911, rumors start to spread that Marie had been involved in a relationship with a prominent physicist, Paul Langevin, who was a former student of Pierre's, and he was way younger than her, so everybody was confused and mad about it.
Scarlet letter time.
Yeah. I mean, they're drawing her, you know, private life out into the public in order to kind of discredit her, which is really fucked up and uncool. Paul was married but estranged from his wife, so his wife found what appeared to be love letters from Marie, and his wife published them openly, which is
very the Reynolds pamphlet,
salty,
if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
The French Reynolds pamphlet.
Agreed. It was a total science scandal. Everybody was pissed because they already think she's like a foreigner and she's getting too much attention and blah, blah, blah. And now she's also like a harlot in their eyes.
Yeah.
And a mother of 2 who is also, you know, like sleeping around.
Also a widow.
In a widow. Yeah. People are mad at her. It came out in the papers while she was away at a conference, and she came home to a literal angry mob in front of her house.
Yeah, her neighbor had to take her and her daughters in for a while because she could not get into her home.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, yeah. And then in that same year, she was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her discovery of the 2 elements polonium and radium. The chair of the committee tried not to get her to come to the ceremony because of all the negative press. He's like, hey, I know you have a lot going on. You don't have to come. And she was like, bitch, whatever, I'm going. You can't stop me.
Yeah, I'm going to be there, so shut up.
Right. And during this time, she like publicly writes a statement to her critics where she's like, I believe there's no connection between my scientific work and the facts of my private life.
And that's true.
It is true. And at this time, she becomes the first person ever to win or share 2 Nobel Prizes, and she is still to this day the only person to win a Nobel Prize in 2 separate scientific fields. I mean, I just feel like you can't overstate what a prolific scientist she was. She was incredibly intelligent.
So in 1912, she mostly kept out of sight. She was fighting depression and an increasingly long list of illnesses.
Right.
She had operations to remove lesions from her uterus and kidney. But despite the lengthy recovery, she was determined to return to science because at the end of the day, like, that really mattered to her.
That's what she wanted to do, yeah.
Yeah. Her second Nobel Prize enabled her to persuade the French government to support the Radium Institute, which was built in 1914. Mm-hmm. Here they would conduct research in chemistry, physics, and medicine. She was appointed as the director to the Curie lab in the institute.
Right.
As she was setting up a second institute in Paris, World War I broke out. And she decided, okay, well, I'll just hop on over there and also make impacts because that's just what we do.
That's what we do.
She realized that soldiers were more likely to survive if they were operated on ASAP, meaning they would need like radiological centers near the front lines to help battle surgeons.
Yeah.
After quickly just casually studying up, she procured X-ray equipment, vehicles, generators, and created mobile radiography units, which became known as Little Curies. And they would like...
Which is adorable.
Which is so cute. Yeah. She became the director of the Red Cross Radiology Service and set up the first French military radiology center. With the help of her daughter and a military doctor, she directed 20 mobile radiological vehicles to be installed in field hospitals. This is just like on the side.
Right, casual.
Like on the side during the war, yeah.
She like pauses her research and casually makes this massive impact in the war effort. It is estimated that over 1 million wounded soldiers were treated with the help of her mobile X-ray units. And one of the things that people said it did the best job of was stopping unnecessary amputations of limbs.
Yeah.
So I'm sure people were very grateful for that.
Yeah, they're like, thanks so much. Like, you're actually a boss.
Thanks, I don't have to have one leg now.
And it's so cool to me that she did this, and it was like science, and it was like medicine, and it was practical, and it was in the moment.
Yep.
And she also like didn't ask like for permission. She just started learning stuff. She's like, oh, I'll learn something here.
Exactly. She's like, I know what needs to be done, so I'm going to do it. I have the money, I have the time, I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Boom. Later that year, she also began personally training other women as aides and technicians, which is really cool and was kind of unprecedented at the time as well. She also invested the bulk of her Nobel Prize money into war bonds to support the French government. And in spite of all of her contributions to the French war effort, she never received any formal recognition from the French government.
Boo.
Which is messed up, but I think if you could ask her now, she'd be like, I didn't do it for recognition, because she's not that type of person.
Yeah, she's not.
Did she deserve it? Yes. But she really liked to fly under the radar.
Yeah. It would have been cool if they had just been like, thanks, girl.
No, I mean, for sure, they should have at least said, like, bravo. But
yeah,
she would sometimes publicly write to people who were writing down her accomplishments and be like, hey, no, don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, she really was a low-key gal.
Yeah.
After the war, she wrote a book, Radiology in War, that summarized her experiences. She went on to tour the U.S. to raise money for her radium research. In 1921, President Harding met with her at the White House and gave her 1 gram of radium that had been collected in the U.S. And then in 1922, she became a fellow of the French Academy of Medicine and traveled abroad to give lectures in all these different countries. It was really cool. She deliberately never patented the process that she had discovered for isolating radium. She said so that other scientists could conduct research unhindered by cost.
And we love that because we've learned how hard that is. Like, once you patent something, you don't have access to it, can't build on it. Makes it almost, unless you have a lot of money. So that's awesome.
Right. And after her growing up really poor, I think the fact that she forgoes all of this profit, like, she could have made so much money by patenting this and deliberately didn't, in an effort just to keep science moving forward. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Led by Curie, her institute would go on to produce 4 more Nobel Prize winners, including her daughter Irene, which I think is so cool.
So cool.
Irene studied at her mother's institute for most of her life. She married her mother's former assistant, Frederick Joliot. Irene and Frederick together were awarded a Nobel Prize for synthesizing new radioactive elements in 1935. And that actually tacked up another record set by the Curie family. It was the first time a parent and child had both separately won a Nobel Prize.
So cool.
Super cool. Her daughter Eve became an award-winning journalist and actually wrote her mother's biography, which she called Madame Curie, that was published in 1937. So every Curie woman is just living her best life.
The bee's knees.
They're the bee's knees, all of them.
Yeah. She became a member of the League of Nations in 1922, and she sat on the Intellectual Committee until 1934, coordinating with the likes of, Albert Einstein.
Just casual.
Hendrik Lorentz and Henry Bergson. In her spare time, she wrote her husband's biography, to honor his life.
Beautiful.
She visited Poland for the last time in 1934 and continued working in her lab until her death. Marie passed away at the age of 66 from aplastic anemia, which was caused by her extended radium exposure. She was laid to rest alongside her husband, Pierre. In 1995, she and Pierre were actually transferred to the Paris Pantheon, right?
Mm-hmm.
in honor of their numerous achievements. She's the second woman to be interred there, and their bodies were sealed in caskets with lead linings because of the high levels of radiation still being given off by their remains, which is nuts.
All of her papers, books, equipment, even her home cookbooks are still to this day considered too dangerous to handle, and they're all stored in lead-lined boxes. Like, if you want to go look at her original research work, you have to sign a waiver and you have to like head to toe lead protective equipment because that's how much radiation is still being given off by just the paper that she worked with at her desk.
Crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's just important to note that all of the scientific discoveries she made were at great personal expense to herself.
They were. She was incredible. I think it's just like really cool to know that, and that you can still see that stuff, but you have to like go to great lengths to do it.
Yeah.
It's almost like also a testament to like her journey.
Right. And I will say, after all of the reading that we did to prepare for this, I have to think that even if she had known the outcome, like if she had known that this research would kill her, I don't think it would have changed anything. In a piece written about Marie Curie, an author named Julie Desjardins wrote, "It's taken a century, but we can finally appreciate her as a multifaceted woman of uncommon intensity, intelligence, and will. A woman of courage, conviction, and yes, contradictions. After a century, we see her not as a caricature, but as one of the 20th century's most important scientists who was, at the same time, unmistakably, reassuringly human."
A Cornell University professor, Pierce Williams, wrote about her and Pierre and said the result of the Curie's work was epoch-making. Radium's radioactivity was so great that it could not be ignored. It seemed to contradict the principle of the conservation of energy and therefore forced a reconsideration of the foundation of physics, which is exactly what we talked about at the beginning.
Right.
On the experimental level, the discovery of radium provided men like Ernest Rutherford sources of radioactivity with which they would probe the structure of the atom. As a result of Rutherford's experiments with alpha radiation, the nuclear atom was first postulated. In medicine, the radioactivity of radium appeared to offer means by which cancer could be successfully attacked.
Yeah.
So the importance of her work cannot be overstated. And shouldn't be. She received many honorary science, medicine, and law degrees and honorary memberships of societies throughout the world. On top of the Nobel Prizes and the Davy Medal of the Royal Society in 1903 and 1921 with her husband, she paved the way for women in science and medicine, forcing herself into rooms so that she could do the work that she believed in.
Yeah.
And that's what we know about that.
Yeah. She's incredible. We hope you love this episode.
Yeah.
You should learn everything you can about Marie Curie.
Yeah, and her kids. Like, that sounds like we should do an episode on her daughters.
Honestly, her daughter also passed away from radiation poisoning, and her husband.
Yeah.
After doing this similar work, right? It's crazy. This family gave so much to science. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave us a review wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We love to read your feedback, and we love you for listening.
We love you guys.
We're back to rusty on this part.
Yeah, we're rusty again. So if you have a recommendation for us to cover next, let us know. DM us on Instagram, Malpractice Podcast on Instagram. Oh, okay. DM us on Instagram at Malpractice Podcast or email us at malpracticepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. But we hope you like this episode, and don't forget, malpractice makes perfect.
Bye.
Bye-bye.